Now let's secure the communication to our applications. The first thing we're going to do is implement an OIDC workflow. For demo purposes, we're going to deploy Keycloak in our cluster, but in your real environment, you might already have your IDP deployed somewhere else. And this IDP, it could be Keycloak or really any IDP that supports your OIDC workflow. So after we deploy it, we're going to configure it so that we create two different users. There's one for user 1 at example.com and the second for user 2 at solo.io. So these email addresses will be important because we're going to put some authorization rules later in the workshop. So let's export these variables. So we know the URL of the Keycloak that we just deployed. And this URL will correspond to the Keycloak service, the service of load balancer that we just deployed. So that's the external IP. And now I can get the token from Keycloak as an admin to be able to automatically create the resources that I need, like the users. Yeah. So we have to create the user, but you also have to define some additional things like the allowed redirect URI and some other things. If you've already familiar with like OAuth or something before, then you know these details. So we're just setting up the OIDC server basically. So let's apply these. Everything's created. Everything's working in Keycloak. And now I can start configuring Gloo to take advantage of it. So first what we'll need to do is we'll make an OAuth secret that corresponds with the Keycloak secret. So we'll create that here. And now what we'll do is create an XAuth policy. Just like other policies in Gloo, you're going to apply it to routes based on labels. So here you can see we're going to put the URL of our application that we already set. But let's check this environment variable. Let me just verify that this environment variable is set correctly. Just need to test it real quick. Yep, okay, it's set properly. So that's the endpoint that I use to access the HTTP bin application. And you can also see the client ID for Keycloak that we've created and the URL, etc. So here what we're saying is that we want to implement this OIDC workflow, and as a request comes in to this workflow, the user will be redirected to Keycloak to authenticate themselves. And after, it will generate a JOT token that we'll call an ID token. And by default, this token is stored in the browser of the user as a cookie, but it's not the best practice because it sometimes just doesn't work because the cookie can be too big compared to the maximum cookie size allowed in the browser. So here what we're going to do is we want to store this JOT token in Redis. So the JOT token will be stored in Redis, and we'll create a session cookie that will be stored in the browser of the user. So now when the user sends a request with this cookie session, the platform will know to retrieve the real JOT token from Redis. So this is the best practice to configure it this way. So once we have it configured, we just need to configure the XAuth server. You could have multiple XAuth servers in your stack, maybe one for different teams, but most people just use a single XAuth server for the cluster. And you can see that as part of Gloo Mesh add-ons, we've had the XAuth server deployed here. So finally, we'll just update my route table so that I have this label, OAuth equals to true. And I also have this /callback prefix because that's where Keycloak is going to redirect the user after they've authenticated. So now the XAuth server can retrieve the JOT token on behalf of the user. So after you configure all this, now we should be good to go to the endpoint and refresh the page. And now you can see I can't access the application directly. I need to authenticate myself. So it redirected me to Keycloak. I will log in with user1, for example. If you remember, this user's email was user1@example.com. So now when I access it, I can see the JOT token. It's also retrieved from Redis and added to the request. So now the backend server, whatever I'm trying to access, can access this JOT token if it needs to. And in another video, we'll even see where we can extract some value from this token automatically. This XAuth server also embeds an OPA library, OPA meaning Open Policy Agent library, where in OPA you can create a Rego language. In Rego language, you can define some additional authorization rules. So here we have some authorization rules using Rego, and we're going to store it as a config map. What we're doing here is we want to decode the JOT token. We want to look at the email claim, and if it ends in at solo.io, then it's going to be authorized. Otherwise, it's going to be rejected. So let's create the config map, and after that, I can update my XAuth policies to have this now 2 steps. One was to authenticating the user, and the second one is to authorizing the user using this new rule that I just created. So let's do that here. And now if I go back and try to access the page, you can see I'm getting a 403 because now I'm not allowed to access it. And the reason why I'm not able to access it is because my email ended in at example.com, not solo.io. We could also go and open a new window and then and authenticate with the second user, user2, which if you remember was at solo.io, and I can now access the page because this user is now authorized.